What would you do if you came home from the school run and found your children's belongings in bin bags on the pavement and a new lock on a door you were still paying rent to open?
I will tell you what I did. I stood on the pavement in January, in a coat that was not warm enough, with my two children beside me holding their school bags, looking at three black bin bags containing every item of clothing we owned, and I called the police. The officer who arrived told me it was a civil matter. I called Citizens Advice. The line was busy. I called my mother. She drove 40 minutes and picked up the children. I sat on the step of a house I could not enter until 11 o'clock at night, when a solicitor I had reached on an emergency line told me the landlord had committed a criminal offence under the Protection from Eviction Act 1977 and that I needed to be inside that property by morning.
I broke back into my own home at midnight using a window latch I had never fixed. My name is not the point. The point is what happened and what it cost me to prove it happened the way it happened. I have anxiety and depression. Both are diagnosed, both are managed, both were documented in my medical records at the time of the eviction. I tell you this because my landlord, a man I will call Derek, knew this, and his legal team would later use it as the basis of a suggestion that my account of events was unreliable. That is the particular genius of using a vulnerable person's vulnerability against them. It requires no evidence, only implication. He is not well. Can we trust what he says?
You can judge that for yourself when you hear what the letting agency employee had on her laptop.
Derek had been threatening to evict me since October. Not formally. No Section 21 notice, no county court proceedings. Nothing that would create a legal paper trail he would have to stand behind. Just letters. 5 letters in 11 weeks, all on headed paper, all citing different reasons why my tenancy was under review, none of them constituting a valid ground for possession under the Housing Act 1988. The letters had the flavour of a man who had read a summary of landlord rights on the internet and believed that persistence had legal force. I had kept every letter. I had responded to each one by recorded delivery. My responses were polite and specific. Here is the legislation you are required to follow. Here is what you have not done. Here is what I expect to happen next. I had been doing this since the first letter because Citizens Advice had told me that documentation was everything, and because I had grown up in a household where my mother kept receipts for everything, and I had absorbed the lesson without fully understanding it until I needed it.
2 minutes in. I want to ask you something. Have you ever felt the specific cold of knowing that the rules exist, but that someone who is supposed to follow them has simply decided not to, and that you are the only person who is going to make them matter?
That is what the pavement felt like. Not outrage, not panic. A cold, weight-bearing fury. I had followed every rule. I had paid every month on time. I have the bank statements going back 3 years, each one a timestamp of money I transferred on the first, never late, never short. I had reported repairs properly. I had given notice of any visitor who stayed more than 14 days as required under the tenancy agreement. I had been on any honest reading a model tenant, and Derek had put my children's clothes in bin bags on a January pavement because he had decided that I was the kind of person who would not fight back. He was wrong about that. The letting agency had managed the property for Derek for 4 years before he switched to self-management in September, 2 months before the threatening letters began. The employee who had handled my tenancy was a woman called Lisa, meticulous, experienced, and in the process of leaving the agency at the time the eviction happened, which meant she had no particular loyalty to the version of events Derek would later put forward. Lisa had kept her own records, not because she suspected she would need them, because she was the kind of person who kept records. She had emails between herself and Derek from the period of her management. She had inspection notes. She had a documented conversation from August in which Derek had asked her in writing how quickly he could get a tenant out if he needed to without going through the courts, and in which she had told him that there was no legal route to possession without either a Section 21 or Section 8 notice properly served and a county court order, and that he needed to follow the process. He had asked how to evict a tenant without going to court. In August.
2 months before the threatening letters. 5 months before the bin bags.
Lisa came forward 3 weeks before the county court hearing. She had seen the local press coverage of the case, which had run a small piece after a housing charity issued a statement about illegal evictions in the area. She contacted my solicitor directly. She said she had something he should see.
My solicitor is a man called Stephen, housing law specialist, the kind of person who does not express excitement but whose voice changes slightly when evidence arrives that he was not expecting. His voice changed when he read Lisa's emails.
The midpoint of this story is Derek's legal team receiving Lisa's disclosure bundle and requesting an adjournment. They did not get one.
The judge found for me on all grounds: unlawful eviction, harassment under the Protection from Eviction Act, and breach of the covenant of quiet enjoyment, the legal right of a tenant to use their home without interference from the landlord. The damages included the value of the items that had been damaged in the bin bags, the cost of the alternative accommodation I had used for the 6 days before I could get back into the property properly, and general damages for the distress caused. Derek also received a substantial fine. I want to give Derek something here because I have thought about him. Derek had bought the property as a pension investment. He had done the sums on what it would yield and had concluded that it needed to yield more than a sitting tenant paying below market rent was going to provide. He had not been evil. He had been financial. He had looked at me as a variable in a calculation and concluded that removing me was simpler than working within the law. The thing he had not included in his calculation was Lisa's laptop. The costly part of this story is not the legal fees, which the judgment covered. The costly part is that my children were on that pavement. My daughter is 8 years old, and she asked me that night, in my mother's kitchen, whether we were going to have to move. I told her no. I was not certain it was true when I said it. I said it anyway. She believed me and went to sleep. I've not stopped thinking about that since. The distance between what you can promise and what you can guarantee. The specific weight of a parent's reassurance when the ground is uncertain underneath it.
We are still in the flat. The new lock Derek fitted is gone. The old one is back. I have the spare key in a drawer in the kitchen and I check it is there every morning when I make coffee, just to confirm it still exists. Some habits you keep.